Ever notice how some things you really learn, like, stick with you, you know?
Yeah.
It's not just hearing it, it's something more.
Mm-hmm.
Like riding a bike. Think back to that.
Right.
Was it someone explaining balance? Or was it the wobbly hands-on part that made it click?
Oh, absolutely. The doing, right?
Our gut says it's the doing, and today we're going deep on why that might be so true.
We've gotten some really cool questions from listeners, actually,
Oh, yeah.
about this, like why physically doing something makes it stick better in your memory than just reading or hearing about it.
Makes sense, yeah.
So that's our focus, memory for action events.
Love it. Okay.
Yeah.
To really get into this, we're looking at a 1989 review by Ronald L. Cohen. It's called Memory for Action Events, The Power of Enactment.
Great piece.
This article is a snapshot of how memory research, which was so focused on words for so long, started to explore remembering things we do.
It's a shift, yeah.
Huge shift.
Big time.
So our goal today is this: to understand why this enactment effect, the power of doing, is so powerful. What does it tell us about how memory works? And for our listeners, how can we use this knowledge to learn and remember better in our lives?
The practical stuff.
The good stuff, right?
Yeah.
Let's unpack this. For decades, studying memory was almost all about verbal memory.
Yeah.
Cohen points out researchers were mostly looking at how we remember lists of words or pairs of words.
Right.
This led to some big theories, like the idea that old memories mess with new ones, or that remembering's easier when the cues at recall are similar to how you learned it initially.
Encoding specificity.
Exactly, encoding specificity.
Hmm.
Can't forget the idea that how deeply we process info affects how well we remember it, or those models of short-term and working memory that focused on mentally rehearsing verbal information.
Right.
Huge insights, but mostly from studying words.
It's true.
Cohen even compares words to fruit flies for geneticists, quoting Tolving on this. They were convenient, easy to study systematically, even if the end goal wasn't just word memory.
Makes sense.
But, as Cohen says, this meant that how we remember actions, things we physically do, was kind of left behind.
Yeah, it was. For a while.
Until, as Cohen puts it, a burgeoning interest in memory for action events started to pop up.
It's like a whole new world opened up.
Totally. Researchers started looking at how well people remember a sequence of instructions like pick up the pencil, put it on the book, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And a constant finding was, when people physically did these instructions as they learned them, they remembered them way better later on.
It's almost like no surprise there, right?
Yeah, it's intuitive but fascinating to see it proven.
Definitely.
And it gets even more interesting when you think about early learning because it's almost all through doing.
Oh, for sure.
Cohen talks about Piaget. And while the developmental stages are debated, most agree that early on, we learn through senses and movement.
Sensory motor world.
A sensory-motor world.
Okay.
A baby grabbing a rattle, a toddler taking first steps.
Exactly. All about action.
Cohen mentions deferred imitation, which shows up around age 2, where a kid imitates an action they saw earlier, even when it's not there anymore.
Oh, wow.
Clear sign of action memory developing.
That's cool.
And then language comes in, but it doesn't replace the action-based learning, it adds to it.
Later's on, yeah.
Cohen brings up McNeil's idea of thinking speaking, suggesting that our gestures and words are tied to our thoughts.
Like two sides of the same coin.
It's exactly so cool. Even Einstein, who we think of as super abstract, reportedly said his thinking was visual and muscular, very nonverbal.
Interesting.
So we instinctively get this in early education, right? Play-based learning, showing and doing, learning to write by physically forming letters.
Right, right.
But Cohen asks, does our formal education system maybe underestimate the role of physical action as we get older and the skills get more abstract?
Like, do we move away from it too soon?
Potentially. It makes you think. He mentions a 1969 study, Asher's work, where people learning Russian understood way faster when they acted out instructions compared to just translating them.
That's wild.
It really is.
So even for something abstract like language.
Exactly. Engaging our bodies can be hugely effective. Key takeaway for anyone learning a new skill, get hands-on if you can.
Makes sense.
Now, to study this in the lab, researchers use what's called subject-performed tasks, or SPTs.
Okay.
Imagine you're in a study.
Right.
You get a series of simple instructions, one after another, tap your head, wiggle your ears, point to the window, and you actually do each action.
Fun.
Later, you try to recall as many tasks as you can, just describing them briefly.
Got it.
That's the basic SPT procedure. And some early findings were surprising. They hinted that remembering SPTs might be different from remembering words.
Okay, how so?
So in word recall, you often see a primacy effect.
Yeah.
You remember the first few items better.
Right.
But with SPTs presented quickly, this primacy effect seemed to vanish. Also, the level at which you process words, like just reading versus thinking about meaning, affects recall.
Mm-hmm.
But this levels of processing effect wasn't as strong with SPTs.
Huh.
And get this, people often said they weren't using any conscious strategies to remember the SPTs, they just did them.
Interesting.
So Cohen called memory for these SPTs non-strategic. Like our brains just encode these actions without us overthinking it.
So are we on autopilot?
Almost, yeah. But Cohen clarifies non-strategic has two meanings. It could mean people don't use strategies, or it could mean even if they try, the strategies don't really help.
Okay.
He mentioned studies where telling people certain SPTs were important didn't boost recall as much as it would for words. And changing how fast the SPTs were presented didn't change recall much either, even when people said they were trying to memorize.
So it's not about effort.
It's like our brains have a default for encoding actions and we don't mess with it much. This is shown by findings that contrast with verbal memory,
Give me an example.
like the generation effect.
Okay.
You remember words you generate yourself better than words you read.
Right.
But this doesn't seem to hold for SPTs. Snapping your fingers because you're told versus snapping because you see a picture of fingers, recall is often similar.
So actively coming up with the action doesn't matter.
It doesn't seem to, which is wild. And even more counterintuitive, making the action more complex. Like instead of touch your nose, doing touch your nose with your left finger while closing your right eye actually made recall worse for SPTs.
Wow.
Opposite of what happens with words where more elaborate encoding usually means better memory.
So simple is better for actions.
It seems that way. But then things get even more interesting. The idea that SPT memory is totally non-strategic started getting challenged.
Okay.
Hellstrip, for one, said whether we use strategies for actions depends on the task and its difficulty. He used the presence or absence of that primacy effect as a clue. Then Lichty and colleagues, studying how aging affects action memory, found something really cool. When they gave SPTs with longer gaps between them, about 10 seconds, they saw a primacy effect.
Oh.
Cohen, looking at his own data where he changed presentation speed, found the same trend. Primacy popped up with longer gaps.
So the speed matters.
Seems like it. So the non-strategic nature might be tied to that rapid-fire presentation.
It makes sense.
With more time, we might use strategies after all. But, important note, while the recall pattern changed, the total number of SPTs remembered didn't necessarily increase.
Okay.
Like gains at the beginning were balanced by losses in the middle.
Interesting trade-off.
It is. And even with primacy showing up, Lichty's team didn't find a strong link between what people said they did to remember and their actual recall.
So the connection between effort and success is still fuzzy.
Very much so. But it's not all differences between action and verbal memory. One similarity is the recency effect.
Okay.
Just like with words, people remember the last few SPTs really well.
Like they're still in our mind's eye.
Exactly. The echoing out theory, which says the recency effect for words is from a short-term buffer, seems to apply to SPTs too.
Interesting.
Cohen replicated an experiment by Gardner and Klee that supported this for verbal memory, found similar patterns with SPTs. People were less able to tell apart the last SPTs they recalled from those they didn't.
So a temporary storage for actions too?
It seems that way, yeah.
Yeah.
And Cohen notes this recency effect for SPTs involves the nonverbal motor parts of the actions.
Oh.
And to emphasize a key takeaway for everyone listening, despite all these nuances, there's a super solid finding. Doing an instruction, an SPT, leads to way better recall than just hearing it without the action.
It's that power of enactment.
Exactly, the power of enactment, like Cohen's title.
Yeah.
So if you want to remember something, doing it even simply can really help.
Makes so much sense.
Now let's look at who's good at this. Early research looked at different groups, and some results were surprising.
Okay, like what?
Young kids and people with intellectual disabilities didn't have significantly worse recall for SPTs compared to adults.
Interesting.
Which isn't always true for verbal memory. This again suggests SPT memory might not need those complex encoding processes that might be less developed in these groups.
Huh.
And a study from Sweden found older adults did just as well as younger adults on short SPT lists.
Wow.
Big deal, considering age-related drops often seen in verbal memory. Suggested action memory might resist aging effects, at least for simpler tasks.
That's pretty hopeful.
It is. But Counselor and colleagues found some conflicting evidence. They saw age differences in memory for activities, but those were often more complex cognitive tasks with a motor part, not the simple actions in typical SPT studies.
Okay.
They also found that telling people to try and remember these activities didn't help much.
Huh.
So how to make sense of this? Cohen and his team found age-related declines in SPT recall showed up mostly with longer lists, around 37 items, not with short ones, about 14.
Okay.
This fits with the Swedish findings using 12-item lists, but not perfectly with Kausler's results with even shorter 10-item lists.
So the length matters too.
Maybe. It could be the activity type, the sequence length. Those things affect whether these group differences show
So it
up.
makes you wonder what the key factor is.
It really does. Anyway, the big picture seems to be, for short, quick lists of simple actions, aging, and even intellectual capacity might have less impact. But this isn't a hard rule. It depends on the study details. Now, even though SPT recall was thought to be non-strategic, researchers found individual differences in how well people did.
Oh, okay.
And surprisingly, how well someone did on SPTs was linked to how well they did on word recall. So action and verbal memory aren't totally separate.
It's connected.
Yeah. This led to exploring retrieval fluency,
Which is
how easily and quickly you can access info from memory. Studies found correlations between SPT and word recall, and also how well people did on semantic memory tasks, like naming cities or bird types.
so like a general memory skill.
Maybe. Suggested that general ease of accessing info might help across different material types. Yokuban has found that even when people got cues, like the verbs describing the actions, to help recall, the differences between good and poor SPT recallers remained.
Oh.
So it wasn't just about encoding, but about retrieval. And again, Lichty's team found no strong link between what people said they did to remember and their actual recall, supporting the idea that retrieval fluency is a big deal.
Interesting.
Now, another layer is that not all SPTs are equally memorable.
Right. Some are just harder.
Initially, the idea was that SPTs with objects not right there in the environment, like break the toothpick, might be harder because you don't have those objects as cues during recall,
Makes sense.
unlike actions with your body or things nearby, like point to the door.
Right.
There was some support for this, but results were mixed.
Okay.
This led to studying other tasks, like experimenter-performed tasks, or EPTs, where you watch someone else do the action.
Oh, okay.
And task instructions,
Yeah.
TIs, where you just hear the instruction, no action.
Got it.
These were compared to SPTs and word lists.
To see the differences.
Exactly. And when researchers looked at how semantically available different items were, like how easily they come to mind in general, the results on episodic recall, remembering the specific task, were all over the place.
Okay.
But one consistent finding was that the action part of the SPT, the verb, affected how well it was remembered more than the object.
Interesting.
And this was true for EPTs and TIs too. Further research even suggested what matters for remembering EPTs might not be the exact movements, but the goals of those movements.
Huh.
So the idea of doing something broadly is what helps, not the specific motor commands.
It's the concept, not the specifics.
Exactly. Now, this leads to the question, is doing an SPT the best, the optimal way to encode something?
Good question.
There's an argument for it, supported by the fact that verbal memory tricks don't boost SPT recall much, and those developmental studies showed less difference between groups.
Right.
But there's also evidence against optimal encoding. For example, categorizing SPT lists like all hand actions then head actions makes them easier to recall, just like with words. And even mnemonics, like one is a bun, touch a bun, can work for SPTs, suggesting retrieval cues help.
Okay.
Cohen argues this doesn't totally disprove effective encoding for typical free recall of uncategorized SPTs, since we don't usually categorize everyday actions.
Right.
A bigger challenge came from finding that when people paraphrased instructions while doing SPTs, their recall got better.
Interesting.
So engaging with the verbal part more deeply led to better encoding.
So words do play a role.
They do. And metamemory research, the ability to judge what we'll remember, also makes things tricky. People are bad at predicting which SPTs they'll recall right after doing them.
Like we don't know what makes an action stick.
Right. But when researchers messed with encoding, like having people do SPTs while also doing a distracting task, and then asked about recall, people could tell which SPTs they'd encoded less well.
Huh.
So we might not be consciously aware of what makes for good action encoding, so we don't use those better strategies on our own. So enactment might be optimal in that it's a decent strategy we do naturally, and we don't know how to improve it ourselves.
We're already doing our best.
Basically. Now, why is enactment so good for memory? Engelkamp and Zimmer proposed that the motor part of an action adds a pathway for encoding, a motor memory trace along with the visual and verbal ones.
Interesting.
Saltz and colleagues had a similar idea, saying the motor aspects add detail to the memory, making it more specific and easier to find.
Makes sense.
Both agree that SPTs, actively doing, beats just hearing, TIs,
Right.
but there's debate on whether it has to be your motor activity. Engelkamp and Zimmer always found SPTs, where you do it, were better than EPTs, where you watch. But Cohen's work and Asher's language study often found no big difference between doing and observing.
Okay.
And some studies even found imagining an action can be as good as doing it.
Really?
Yeah, which challenges the idea that physical execution is crucial.
Wow.
Seems like enactment, whether you do it or see it, adds something to memory that helps retrieval. The exact movements might matter less than just having some relevant activity connected to the info.
Interesting.
Now, Cohen talks about later experiments where he got unexpected results.
Okay.
Primacy effects in SPT recall. And people could accurately predict their SPT recall.
Huh.
Even more surprisingly, sometimes SPT recall was lower than or equal to object recall.
Interesting twist.
It is. He analyzed the differences, noting that earlier SPT work often used actions without separate objects and focused on remembering the events themselves.
Right.
These later experiments used objects, and Cohen suggests the task might have shifted in people's minds to be more about remembering the objects.
So the focus changed.
Exactly. The objects being there in other conditions might have boosted object memory, while doing the SPT might have split attention, making it harder to encode the objects well.
Makes sense.
And the instructions might have unintentionally made it about remembering the objects and what was done with them, not the actions themselves.
So the way the task is presented matters.
Hugely. It shows how we see the task shapes the memory effects.
Yeah.
If it's about remembering actions, we see the SPT benefits. But if it's about remembering objects, things change. And enactment might even distract from the goal.
Fascinating.
And the fact people could predict their object recall in these studies, not just for verbal info, suggests a broader metamemory capacity beyond just language.
It's more than we thought.
It really is. It shows how crucial it is to design experiments carefully, so the emphasis, action, or object is clear to participants. Even small differences between labs could explain why findings vary.
It's all connected.
It really is. So to sum up, enactment generally boosts memory. The specific movements matter less than the doing itself.
Right.
Action memory doesn't always follow the rules of verbal memory. And we're not great at knowing what makes an action memorable. And sometimes doing something can even hurt our memory if it takes our focus away.
So much to think about.
Tons. And going back to your question about learning by doing, like tying your shoes, our brains do seem wired to remember what we do.
It's how we're built.
So here's a final thought. Since our brains are tuned to remembering actions, how can you consciously use more doing in your learning, no matter the subject?
Good question.
Could even mental enactment or visualization work similarly, given that imagery can be almost as effective as physical action, based on what we talked about?
I like that.
Think about how you could use this to improve your own memory and understanding.
It's really powerful stuff. It has huge implications for how we learn and remember.
It does.
So think about these findings, maybe even experiment with using more active learning in your life.
Yes.
And if you have any insights or questions, let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.